I'd like to get started. This event is being photographed and recorded, and the person doing that is just getting his equipment together, so just give us a minute. But we do have some seats up here. Anyone want to sit right up front here? There are some more seats. Thank you for everyone quieting it down a little bit. On behalf of my wife and myself, I want to thank everyone for coming out. We really enjoy sharing our facility here with everyone. It's just a wonderful thing that we can do this, and I hope everyone enjoys coming out today and participating.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Just to give you a brief history before we have our guest speakers take over, Dan Ryder and myself were part of the Lehigh Valley Shelby group back in the late 80s, and we needed a place to have a car show. It was something our club just never had, so I provided our parking lot at Blocker, Harley Davidson, Yamaha, and we had our very first car show, which was attended by 2 cars because it was in April and it rained and it was cold and it was miserable. So we kind of kept on that date for about 2 or 3 years and getting ourselves kicked in the pants with the weather. So finally we decided to move to June. And as June came along, we did finally get some great weather, and the event was growing and growing, and by that time Viper came along. So Viper, being part of, it's another snake, and Carroll Shelby was associated with it, and that's what we started with Cobras and Shelbys and Fords. Let's bring on some more snakes, so we brought the Vipers in to the event, and it has grown, as you can see. Viper enthusiasts are just awesome. They really like to participate. So we're proud to have you here, and certainly proud to have our guests here today. The thing that I want to point out that we do different, our committee of about 6 of us have been meeting for the past year to put this together. But the thing that we do is a little bit different. We do not charge. We have no registration. We don't have the administration to do a registration, so we have no registration, we have no charities, we have no judging, we have no trophies, and we don't really bring on spectators because it's for you, car enthusiasts and cars. It's not about everybody else. Now, there are car shows out there that, spectators can come to, and that's great. That's those car shows, but ours is what we consider a gathering of enthusiasts. So that's what you folks are today, is a gathering of car enthusiasts. So I hope you enjoy your day. And just to quickly introduce our committee, it's Mike Kachapik, which everyone knows. And Mikey, his son, who's done a whole bunch for us through Havoc. And Gary Miller, I don't know if Gary's out there, he was helping park cars, Gary Miller. And also Jeff Miller, no relation, but Jeff's part of it. Len Brasavich, he's the fellow with the older Ferrari out there, and he's probably out guarding his car. And we have, Rob Aldinger, and I don't see Rob here. He's also a part of the event tomorrow. So hopefully all these people, you get to meet all these people that help make this possible. So with all that said, I do want to make one other quick announcement. We're already working on next year's event. Next year we're going to honor the 65, 66 Shelbys. It's going to be the 60th anniversary of the GT350. So we're working on getting a panel of folks that go back to the 65, 66 year frame and have them as honored guests. We picked the date. In your bag with your wine, you should have received a flyer that gave the date. If you can save the date, The only thing we haven't decided is the location. Now, I don't know if you want to come back here, you might want to go someplace else. So that's what we haven't decided on. So we're working on that. We're going to try to keep everybody posted, and certainly you're welcome to come out again. Thank you, and I'm going to turn this over to Mikey.
Thank you all for coming here today. We really appreciate the turnout. We have great weather, and we have this awesome board of the Viper team members. To the very right, we have Dick Winkles. In the middle, we have Sandy, and we also have Ken Nowak here today. And they're gonna tell us some stories, give us a little bit of introduction of what they did with the Viper and how they got involved. So we're gonna kind of go through some of the Viper history, and you're gonna hear it from the guys that were there. And we're going to be able to hear these amazing stories and all the weird stuff that happened with Chrysler to make these cars happen. Because when Viper came out, it was something that they didn't have a lot of money to do, and they figured it out. And the team of guys that made this happen, it's just amazing to hear these stories. And we are very grateful to have them here today. So I'm very excited to introduce all of them. And we're going to ask them questions. We're going to do some MC stuff. We'll tell them. We'll kind of go through the things that they did, and you'll get to hear some really good stories today. So I want to thank you all for coming and participating in this, and you guys help make these events happen, so it's really fun to do. So with that being said, hey, you want to
Yeah, we do that. Because I have fun with this. These guys all know me. So
This is cold water.
I've been with before. On the far right, Dick Winkles. He's affectionately known as Mr. V10. He's responsible for all of your engine problems. But he was Gen 1 to the rest of them. He still does work at Prefix. They have a 9-liter version that's available for the Viper and a 9-liter Extreme. Dick brought all of his computers, so if anybody needs a cartoon, I think it starts at $500. No, I'm kidding. But tremendous guy. They got stories that go back crazy. Sandy Everling here in the middle. He was the interior and exterior design manager. These are Team Viper. These were at the very beginning, these guys. The rest of them I left at home. Just the important ones I brought. But Sandy was extremely excited about how to do things. When he went from Gen 2 to Gen 3, he'll talk a little bit more about that, why the design changed and why they fired that guy. I'm kidding. Yeah. And then lastly, Ken Nowak, and he never told me his title until a few minutes ago. That's why I'm leaning in. He was a senior engineer in charge of the prototype designs. So it was his facilitating that made the mule. And it was actually his fault they made it white. Which I just found out recently. And then obviously had the V8 in it and that. But evolving into the other prototypes, all of the racing versions where they put the headlights in for the Le Mans and all that, that's Ken. That was Ken and his group. So, and he's got a lot of those too. I'm sorry, Ken. Okay, it was just Ken. So yesterday we were at a collection and they had a bunch of model cars and there was like the sticker number 51 for that race car. And he goes, I remember laying that 51 on the hood where it had to go. Pretty cool story, right? And me, I'm just the president of MCBO because I didn't step backwards fast enough. And I'm the one that gets all the phone calls and complaints. So that's my job. But it's really a pleasure to be with these guys. The stories that they have are endless. They can go on. They'll tell you stories that they're not supposed to tell you, all that kind of stuff as well. But I'm going to turn it over to, did you want to? I'm not going to keep going.
Yeah, so I figured what we'll do is we'll have them introduce themselves. Tell them something like favorite. So, what basically, if you guys can, we'll pass the mic down. Essentially introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you were doing, how you got involved. A quick little minute thing, and then we'll kind of go down the line. You can all tell stories. And, we'll MC. I have some questions, and I know some stories that I really enjoyed from you guys that I've heard through the years. So when we get through all that stuff, I'll also ask some questions, and Kurt Shaw behind me will also ask some questions too. So if you want to introduce yourself.
My name's Ken. I started out as a child. I used to build funny bicycles and that sort of thing when I was in grade school and high school, and I was the one that was 5 feet up in the air kicking off your rearview mirrors when I went down the street and that sort of thing. I was part of a group we called Team Shelby, which was an endurance racing group that we created as part of Chrysler, but it was an after-hours deal. We took home 2 National Endurance Cup championships. We would run 2 24-hour, 2 12-hour, and 2 6-hour races each season. And that was in the Dodge Shelby Chargers. And at the time, Carroll Shelby was associated more with Chrysler than with Ford because of his association with Lee Iacocca. So that's kind of what started all of that. And the Team Shelby guys all worked together after hours, just ridiculous. Hours didn't matter, time didn't matter. What mattered was when the green flag dropped, we had to be ready. And we would do, I don't know, I would say somewhere around 13 brake stops per 24-hour race. And we would have some very close competition against the Mitsubishis, and we would win a 24-hour race by about 14 seconds. Now, that's pretty tight racing. I don't care what you're racing. I don't care if it's go-karts, bicycles, or, racing is intense, and that was pretty intense competition. All of us who worked together kind of gravitated into Team Viper when we found out that Bob Lutz decided, why don't we try to build a Cobra for the 90s? And we all just kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, man. And out of about 1,000 people that kind of came to a presentation in a huge building we called the Styling Dome at the time, and it was just about what it sounds like. All the clay models and show cars for the corporation would be in the Styling Dome for various meetings. And Carroll Shelby, Bob Lutz set up his Cobra in the middle of that Styling Dome and just put out a call for all the car nuts. Now, we were building Omnis and Horizons and Reliance and other exciting K cars. But at night we'd go home and build turbocharged Shelby Chargers and go racing. And I built a 33 Plymouth Street Rod and that sort of stuff. And we were building good stuff on our own and just building roller skates during the day at work. So out of the 1,000 or so people that came to that Styling Dome, I think the 3 of us were part of a group of about 80, I think, that were accepted as the guinea pigs to make something happen. So I was lucky enough to get the job to build the first running concept Viper. That's a long story, but I had to build it on my American Express card because the company didn't know how to build anything other than K cars, and nobody in purchasing could buy me a piece of steel to build a frame out of. So I had to literally drive down to the steel shop, shack, and buy metal and take it to the metal shop and roll out the drawings and let the guys loose. So it was great fun. I had a job that doesn't exist, and I just loved it. It fit me perfectly.
I did a lot of work on Blackbird, as you can tell. I actually didn't get into the Viper program right at the beginning when you were asking for volunteers and things like that. Basically, I wouldn't have been allowed to join the program, but a couple of my guys did leave the department I was in to go to Viper, and one of the engineers at Viper actually left the program for a promotion, of course, and they needed to replace him, so my name was brought up by several people, and I interviewed for the job with Roy Schoberg, and he sat me down and wanted to know what I like to do. I like to bike race, pedal bike, competitive track racing, velodrome stuff, and I love fast cars. My first car was a '69 Z28 that I loved to run drag strip with. speed skated, like Apollo Ono, which I did what Apollo did, except I wasn't as fast. But anyways, so I ended up joining Viper. Like I said, Roy sat me down and I told him what I like to do and things like that. And then he told me all the issues that they still were worried about with the Viper. And one after another, after another, after another. And he said, "No, you really sure you want to do this?" And that was the time that Chrysler was reorganizing from commodity groups to platform groups. Which doesn't matter if you know what that is, but I kind of got caught up in that, and I didn't like what was happening. So because I was nominated for Viper, I joined Viper. So my responsibility, as was already said, was design and development of all exterior, all interior for the Gen 1, Gen 2. And I like to tell people, if it's not engine and it's not chassis or suspension, it was part of my group. So again, that was only Gen 1, Gen 2.
Hello. I worked at Chrysler for 34 years, and they were wonderful years. I could never have written the story, the stuff that I got to do at Chrysler. I like to say I'm probably the one guy, because I didn't say that. But initially, I was drafted under the Viper. I didn't sign up to join it. I didn't even know what Viper was because I was in Italy on a 7-month assignment over there to work with Lamborghini. So I lived in Maranello, just down the road from Ferrari, and went over to, at that time, the Formula One team was in Modena, and I was doing Formula One work, so I hadn't heard about Viper, and I got back from my 7-month assignment in April, and my boss, my old boss, said to me, "You're going to work for Viper." Thanks, Viper. I don't know what Viper is. He said, "It's going to be our V10 sports car." I said, "Well, that sounds good to me." So that was about all it took to say the V10. And I was working on a V12 at Lamborghini, but we were phasing into the V10 Formula One engine. So I was getting that engine running on a Chrysler control system, believe it or not. And the rest was history. I stayed with Viper for 22 years. I took a little sabbatical after 1993 because the bosses at Chrysler said, "We don't know how long we're going to build this thing, so you might want to go find another job." So I went looking and found a good job, and I don't know, if you guys have all remember or heard of the Stratus touring car, American racing stuff. I was assigned to that, in charge of that, and that was a great program to be part of because it was a really good learning experience. You could run things and things you'd never think would make a difference, you could find it. And it was really a great experience. So I did that, and then the manager for the race team, which was Neil Hanneman, who left that position, and that became available, and they kind of came back to me and said, "We want you to come back and do this." So that was my only real foray out of engines. Brakes, suspension, transmission, all this scary stuff. So I really relied on my guys for that. So I did that for 2 years. Won the 24 Hours of Daytona and all that good stuff. It was a great experience, but racing is tough. So I went back to kind of rescue the Gen 3 because they were in trouble with the motor. It was only making on a good day, we call 400 horse, and it was supposed to be 500, so we tuned that up, we got it at 500, and then went on to the Gen 4 and Gen 5. So I couldn't have guessed that I would have done such things in high school.
So my first question / going back and forth is gonna be for Ken. I always loved the story when you guys were building that prototype, when Bob Left showed up at the factory and the drive shaft was too short. So if you could go through, if you remember that one? You can go through and explain that one and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, the first mule car, I was trying to build a property that kind of resembled a Viper. It was the outside envelope, it kind of felt like a Viper. It had a chassis that kind of worked like a Viper. It had probably a 350 horsepower V8 in it instead of the V10 because we were way ahead of the V10. It had a 6-speed manual transmission in it. And it was invented from air and parts so that I could drive there in the back of my Dodge Spirit from the steel shack. The body for that car, I had rudimentary chassis design, and that was about a wrap right there. The body was, I splashed a property that Carroll Shelby had in California that was actually steel. One of the first Viper properties was actually hammered out of steel by the Folio brothers in California. And it was about the size of a Cobra. It wasn't the size of a current Viper, but it was something that sort of looked like a Viper. So I had that shipped back to Highland Park at the times where headquarters was. And I had a plastic shop pull female molds off of this car. And then to fit the V10 or to fit the envelope that we thought the car was going to have, I had to cut it down the middle and make it 3 inches wider and cut it in behind the front wheels and make it 3 inches longer and that sort of thing. And we just kind of glommed that fiberglass upside down bathtub onto this chassis. And the project always had elicited interest all around the corporation. Everybody wanted to know what we were doing, but they were kind of afraid to touch because they didn't know if we were going to live or die. And they were always peeking in the doorways and that sort of thing. So we were kind of driven by presentations and shows. And I got a note from Roy Scholler, well, we're going to present the car you're building to the team at 3 o'clock on Friday. Oh yeah? So we're running around like, chickens with their heads cut off, putting this thing together in a secret room in the old engineering garage over there, which had been the production line for Maxwell Truck. If you go back in the history of the corporation, Maxwell became Maxwell Chrysler, became Chrysler. So it was one of the really historical buildings for the corporation. So I always felt kind of a special affinity for the history of building the first Viper in a building where Chrysler was born, kind of a thing. But it was a crappy old concrete place. It leaked. I was afraid it was going to fall down, but we got it done. And as this deadline for the presentation approached, we find out, of course, the vice president of engineering is coming so, oh boy. The last part that finally shows up is the drive shaft that was in the machine shop, and they were taking a good sweet time to get it there, and I think it probably showed up about 2:30 in the afternoon for a 3 o'clock program. So we go to plug the drive shaft spline into the transmission and go to hook up the differential, and there's about 3 inches missing there. Oh, shoot, what are we going to do now? Well, we had enough engagement, we thought, you know what, it won't be a problem to just idle this thing down to the showroom, and put on the deal, and we'll have the machine shop make up another shaft tomorrow and everything will be fine. So we do that. I idled it down probably 500-foot long hallway, and everybody's kind of standing there, and I'm making a lot more noise than I need to because it's just fun to do that. Flipping the throttle and all that stuff. I put it on display, and we have our great presentation, and everybody's shaking hands, and the vice president of engineering is happy, and he smiles, and I smile. Everything's great. We take a bunch of pictures. Everybody goes home. We're just about to turn out the lights, and the phone rings. Well, Bob Lutz heard that you got a Viper running. He's on his way back from Ann Arbor. Oh, he wants to drive it all right. So he walks around, he shows up there, he was in, we had a, what was it, a Lamborghini engine in the Spirits at the time, we had like the dual overhead cam thing, he had the hot rod Spirit. It was a Maserati, yeah, okay. Well, that's what he was driving, he pulled it in right next to the showroom, right next to where the Viper was sitting, and this thing was smoking hot, because he had just brought it back from Ann Arbor, and it probably wasn't under 100 for more than 30 feet. He's got his cigar and he's walking around this car and he's just, and a little trail of smoke is following him around, you know, and he's looking at this. He liked, the car was very, very rudimentary race car, Zeus fasteners everywhere, no door hinges, backlit hinges or everything. Everything was all pinned together. But it was a Viper, as close as you can get at the time. So he finally, we unbuttoned the door and he sits in, so I'm gonna take you for a ride. All right, Bob, you really, really gotta take it easy. It's never been out of the building, you know? We pin the doors on it and Roy Schoenberg, our executive engineer, gets in the right front seat. And they kind of roll it out through the building and he's just idling and idling. And this is an old rickety building where the doors are like bifold and they just kind of creep their way open. And he just kind of idles the thing out there, makes a left turn and he just dropped a hammer. I think he was airborne within about 30 feet when he went over the loading ramps. And we kind of all walked out, and it's December, it's cold, and we're all just got maybe a sport coat and a sweater on, you know, but it didn't matter because we're all thinking, we're dead. And we're just listening to this thing, it made music. He was just running through the gears, and this was a large, fenced-in complex of concrete buildings with cars parked along the aisles and all that, but everyone's gone home pretty much except the cleaning people, and I don't know how some of them weren't killed because he was just running everywhere. We could just hear this thing winding up and revving down, winding up and revving down, and we're all just kind of holding our breath waiting for the sound to stop. But it never stopped. He brought that thing back, and two little headlights came up the ramps that he flew over to leave, and he pulled up in front of us, and he's just smiling, and Herbie held big hands in the cigar that he left on the windowsill, and they're taking pictures, and we all just thought we had to get new jobs, but that was a beautiful night, I'll tell you that. What a beautiful noise that car made.
So we're going to continue to make our way down the line. I had the fortunate opportunity, I was in the truck with Sandy yesterday, and I actually asked him about Gen 1 and Gen 2 dashes and why they were, how they were painted and all that other stuff. So it was a really good informative reason. So I would like you to explain that if you can.
It had a really cool story. But this isn't one of them.
You can tell a cool one next, because everyone wanted to know why the dash was the way it was.
This is somewhat embarrassing. One of the things about Black is new product development and so forth. And the body panels prove that. They're made out of a material that nobody ever used before, except maybe on trucks. It probably had plus minus an inch or two tolerance. So to say that that was going to be the material for the entire body and all the body structure was kind of far-fetched, but that was the way it was going to be because it was one of the technology things. And obviously the V10, major technology. But there are a lot of things that the Viper did to accelerate technology, advance technology. But one of the things that we did was the IPs on the Gen 1, Gen 2. And somebody, and I don't know who did it, but I think it was the styling guys really, they found out about this new special paint that was really cool. And it was called Ultra Slate. You know, it had that real nice cool feel, right? And then when the GT2, when the Gen 2 came along, they did it again with soft touch, okay? I don't know how they did it with the Gen 2 based on what happened with the Gen 1. But anyway, so we were told to do this. And anyways, the paint guys kind of reported to me, even though I don't know anything about paint, because I keep telling the story, some of these things. Well, you can assign it to the engine guys, or you can assign it to the chassis and the suspension guys, or you can give it to me. So, things like airbags and all that stuff that, I didn't know anything about, ended up under my group. But anyways, we did this IP in this special paint, and I don't know what happened to the company that made it. I think they went out of business. But the bottom line is, you can't fix it, okay? I mean, if you scratch it, it's like, you can repaint your IP either gray or black, depending on what you have, but it wasn't the same. You could make it look kind of the same, but it wasn't really the same. So that's one of the more embarrassing parts of my job that just didn't turn out well at all. And again, it was both for the Roadster, and like I said, I can't believe we did it again, on the coupe.
Now that you explained that, because I had so much feedback yesterday online about why that was the way it was, what was your favorite part of being on Team Viper? What was the thing that really drove you into it?
Well, I've always liked things that were different. I was always brought up that way. Before I joined Viper, I always wanted to push the envelope. I had a philosophy that if you can do something that's better, maybe save money and improve the product, and it was a good thing for Chrysler. And again, that was always my philosophy whenever I worked on it. And I have many examples that are not Viper that I did throughout the career. Most of them, I was told you couldn't do it. And so that made me even want to do it more. And I always convinced management to do these things because I always said, well, if it doesn't work, we can always go back and do it the way we did it last year. And so I was lucky enough to get things to happen like that. But anyways, I think I lost my train of thought. But anyways, that was the kind of thing that we did.
Is it true that you wanted to put your face on the Chisholm?
Oh. The Chimzo is one of my favorites. So I mean,
Center high mounted stop.
yeah, so on the back, center my high mounted stop. It's a government requirement. And the reason I love this story is it wasn't brain surgery. It was nothing like the kind of stuff that Dick does in any way, shape, or form. But it was just cool, And I'll start by saying the show car for the Gen 2 had this LED that went across the back because Schulberg told me to follow the styling guys that were working on the Gen 2 show car to make sure they didn't do anything totally crazy. And so I spent a lot of time over there. And when I saw the Chisholm on the back, I said, did that come from a Cadillac or what? And I don't know what they said. I said, it's totally not Viper. I said, you guys got to be able to do something better than that. And so they said, well, come on with us to the back room, we'll show you. They built them. They took a box, painted it black, and created a Viper Shinzo looking logo. It looked like the Viper logo. And he put a light in the back, and of course he had a red background, and he flipped the switch and it lit up. And I said, that is what the Viper ought to have. And I said, well, we got to do that. And the guys that were building the show car said, well, we talked to styling about it, and they didn't like it. And I said, you got to be kidding. And I shouldn't really say this, but I think it was part of it wasn't invented here with the styling guys, so they didn't like it. So I said, well, we got to do something about that. I said, can you put it on a car? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, put it on a car or we'll go back and see if we can pass the specs. And you can't believe the specs. it had to have 4.52 square inches of illuminated area. It could only be so high from the ground. It had to satisfy illumination requirements at a 30-degree angle, 10 feet away from the car. I mean, the crazy government requirements. And I'll be darned if that thing didn't fit without having to change anything, because there's no way we would have changed anything. But that sucker just fit perfect. So anyways, this was about the time that I had to do a presentation with Lutz and a bunch of vice presidents on what was different between the show car and the production car that was being designed. And so we were up in Bob Lutz's office, which I thought was really cool. And I had a drawing. This is not a computer thing. This is a blue line drawing, the same size as the car, up on the board, okay? And I started from one end of the car to the other to talk about the differences between the show car and the production car. And when I got to the back of the car, I had the guys draw the Viper head logo. And so I got to the back of the car and I said one of the most diplomatic things I ever said in my life. I said, because Tom Gale was their vice president of styling, right? And I said, we have a proposal for an illuminated Viper head. And Bob says, well, it looks pretty interesting. I says, well, it's just a proposal. And so Lutz looked at Tom Gale and says, well, what do you think about that, Tom? Well, the styling guy's already mixed it, right? And so Tom said, well, it looks pretty interesting, so we'll investigate it. So Lutz says, well, it'd be great if you could put that on a car. And I said, well, we actually have it on a car, and it's in the basement. So Bob said, well, let's go see it. So we jumped in his private elevator on the 6th floor, went down to the basement. I jumped in the car, put the brake on, and it lit up. And Lutz said, I think that's fantastic. We got to do that.
Alright, so now everybody knows that Dick was the birth of the V10 motor, he's the V10 guy. So we're gonna keep this to the basics, but everyone always says, people that don't really know, is the V10 Viper motor the V10 truck motor? So if you can kind of explain some of that, just so we get the basics out of the way.
Okay, so you guys all know about the Hellcat, right?
Yeah.
That's a truck motor. It started out in the Ram, so, you know, I would pose that to anybody that says it's a truck motor, but we started, Kenny mentioned the white car, we had a 300 horsepower V8 that we put in there. We made two of those, one for the dyno, one for the car. And it was a time when MPI was just starting at Chrysler. I started in '80, and I was working on carburetors, you know, along with other stuff. And then we transitioned to MPI, and everything was, for the V10 particularly, was really not defined. So they were going in for the truck with gang fire on the injectors and 102 control sensor and all this stuff that you knew wasn't going to work. So I had to define the Viper system, and I wanted 202s, I wanted sequential injection, you know, right on down the line. And everybody said to me, well, you don't need that, do you? Yes, we do. So I wanted to really kill it and make sure we had everything we needed. So as it turned out, at the end of the day, the truck followed us. An interesting story on the truck. We were running, we managed to get one V10 out of the truck group, and that was frankly stolen. It was sitting out in the hall one day, and nobody seemed to want it, you know, it's looking for a barn out there, so we just kind of dragged it off. Don Jankowski, who was kind of the chief criminal of the group.
Part of the race group,
Yeah.
that's how we funded ourselves.
So we took that thing in, and, you know, it had a lot of issues. It wasn't going to work in a Viper anyway, you know, besides the fact that it was so heavy. The thing weighed 900 pounds. So we put it on the dyno, we started doing things, head work, camshafts, and so on and so on and so on, and it ended up making 360 horsepower, and it was really the first V10 running because we led the truck guys again. But we found lots of issues with the design, we changed a bunch of stuff before they even started. At the end of the day, did it have any common parts with the truck? Not really. The control system was similar but not the same because we went, again, sequential injection. They had kind of a two-gang firing initially, so it drove them into a different controller. So no, it's not a truck motor. The small block Chevy was a truck motor first and foremost, I believe, and it's probably one of the greatest engines ever designed. So I think having that moniker associated with the V10 isn't necessarily such a bad thing.
So can you explain some of the process that you worked with Lamborghini to transition from the iron block to the aluminum block?
We had Lamborghini, Iacocca had purchased the thing for various reasons we won't get into probably. The truck engine, again, it had many issues. It was extremely heavy. We didn't have any U.S. suppliers, honestly, that could do a casting that large at that time. The block was big even for V10. So Lamborghini, I knew, had in-house suppliers for that. They weren't part of Lamborghini's parent company, but they did exclusively Lamborghini work, and it was in Bologna, Italy, which was just down the road from where I was living. So we went to them for the castings. Lamborghini had to make some modifications to the drawings. I didn't want Lamborghini to change a lot of things because we felt pretty confident with what we designed. The water jacket was particularly questionable. It was about 30% of the bore, the stroke of the bore. And Chrysler design philosophy at that time said it needed to be at least 60, so I felt like the thing was going to overheat, as soon as we started it up, but it really didn't. It ran pretty well. So Mauro Fugari, who was running the Lamborghini design team at that time, was in charge of the Ferrari race program for a number of years, and he'd use that for Formula One engines first, and it just plain worked, surprisingly. It did drive the oil temperature up, but you put an oil cooler in it, and it worked fine.
So this next question is probably for all of you, but I think Ken may know the story best. Can you explain why you guys had Roy get a company minivan to get materials from other facilities without issue? Go back to the stealing process of some of these to make this car work.
Reappropriation of corporate assets.
Okay. I'm not corporate enough to know that terminology.
And it was a Beat 150 van at the time, a 127-inch wheelbase, no windows. At the time, a certain executive level would be assigned a vehicle, or two or three, depending on who you were. And the rest of us rubby dubs had to buy or lease various program cars. But the fun part of having a car that happened to have gold Pentastars on the corners of the windshield was that all you had to do was wave at the guard when you went out the gate and came back in the gate. And if you could park it wherever you want to park it, it was like, don't ask questions. And it wasn't that we were actually doing anything illicit, but it was just so much hassle to write the shippers, to walk it over to shipping and losing, and to get everything signed and approved, and there was like 7 copies of everything you had to do, and they were, at the time, they were carbon copies and all that, so just to kind of expedite shipping, we needed a vehicle with gold stars.
It's paperless procurement.
I like it, it works for me very well. But one thing that I didn't mention building the mule car is that I painted the very first car white. And had I asked or had the committee decided what we were doing, it obviously would have been red, just like the show car. But since I read Motor Trend since I was 4, I think, I knew that the first year production Corvette was white because they couldn't get the quality of the fiberglass panels to a saleable level in any other color but white. So it was just kind of a nod to history. I figured it was like we're boxers, you know, kind of like touching gloves when I painted it white. So it was like us against the bet, we're on. So that's why the mule car is white.
So far, does anybody have any other questions before we dive into some other stories and all that other jazz?
Who was credited with the name?
He asked who was credited with the name? Like Viper? Who came up with that? You guys have an answer?
Yeah.
You got a story for the moment?
Francois Gastang was our executive vice president in charge of engineering, and Francois was in charge of the Renault Formula One team back in the glory days when they came out with the V6 Turbo. He was responsible for that engine. So he had Senna and he had Probst, I don't know, other good drivers driving for Team Renault, and he was up against Ferrari all the time. So he and Vagari had been adversaries in Formula One, and now Vagari was working for Gastang, so it was kind of an awkward situation, but they got along pretty well actually once it all was said and done. So. But anyway, I forget the other question now.
How'd you get to the name Viper?
Oh, yeah. Well, the executives were over in Europe, and this is the way Francois told me the story went down, and it's kind of interesting with a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of it seems to be folklore anymore. But, Tom Gale will tell you one story, Francois will tell you a little different story, and Bob Lutz, when I asked him about it, kind of hedged and didn't answer. So I think the correct story, and this is putting Francois and Tom's story together, was that they were on a corporate jet flying back from Europe, and the car was running a little behind for the auto show, getting the first car in the auto show. And I think Lutz said, we gotta name this thing, because the show's coming up in another month or two. And they started kicking around names, and Lutz wanted it to have some sort of relation back to the Cobra. So what about snake names? And Lutz asked Francois, what do you call snakes in France? Because he was, born and raised in France. And he said, vipers. And Francois had a pretty heavy accent. So anyway, Lutz said, yeah, I like that. So they kind of kicked around a few more names, but they ended up coming back to Viper. And Tom Gale will tell you that came from an associate of his that was European, and they were having dinner the night before, flying back to the States, and they talked about a name, and according to Tom, this fellow gave him the name Viper. So which one's correct? Probably a little bit of both.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm a Shelby guy. I've always liked the Viper right from the beginning. And I appreciate being here, and thank you very much for you guys. That's an excellent wording. Did you have a count? Did you guys have
We do that
a
later.
record? Was it like Vipers here today?
We didn't count yet.
I have the numbers.
Okay, what are the numbers?
You want to hear it now or later?
We can hear it now.
All right, 14 Ferraris,
Wow.
61 Vipers and Dodges.
Okay.
65 Fords. With one, as of 11 o'clock, but I'm Dan Ryder, I'm the president of the Shelby Club. We've been running this event 30 years. Total cars on field, in and out so far, 145. This is our largest event ever.
I want to know what inspired the 3 white and blue striped GTSs and who wound up with them and why and how can I get one?
The blue and white stripes and white and blue stripes are all FIA colors. They're international colors for FIA racing vehicles. And the United States colors are white and blue stripes. And I believe blue and white stripes also have Canadian colors, I think, of white and green stripes. But they're national colors, and that's why the cars were painted that way initially. That's why the initial Cobras were like that. The Cobra Daytona Cobras, so that's why they striped that way. Now you're manufacturers advertising colors, bold, whatever else, not white. But the original source of the stripes and so forth is national colors declared by racing.
Okay. Again, I love to tell the story. I hope everybody can handle it. Okay. But I had a blue Gen 2 with white stripes, like all the initial Gen 2s. And one day I was in the studio, the styling studio, and I saw a board with probably 12 or so future colors. Because again, this was before the build of the Gen 2 vehicle. And of course, we all knew it was going to be blue with white stripes. And so I saw all these colors, and I just thought they were fantastic. Just different stripe colors with different base colors. And one of them was white with blue stripes. And I saw that and I thought, wow, I really like that. And as I said, I had a blue car ordered with white stripes. That's all you could get. It just so happened that during that same time period, the question came up on how we're going to handle metallic stripes. Because the blue car with white stripes, the white is not a metallic. It's what's called a straight shade paint. And it does not require clear coat. And the 96 blue with white striped cars, that white stripe is not clear coated. The blue's clear coated. And so, again, the question was, what are we going to do with metallic stripes? Because some of those several colors that I looked at had metallic stripes. Well, again, the paint guys reported to me, as I said, I don't know anything about paint, but I asked the guys, I said, well, what are we going to do? Because not 96 necessarily, but 97 and so forth. I said, well, how are we going to do this? And they said, well, we have 3 ways to do it. And I said, well, okay, that's nice, but what's the best way? And they said, well, we're really not sure. So I said, well, I tell you what, I will volunteer my car that I have ordered to be white with blue stripes. And they kind of said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we have white paint from the what we call the 95 and a half specialty cars. You know, the white with the blue stripe and the black, and then of course the red with the yellow wheels. And so we have white paint, and we obviously have blue paint for the coupe, and the blue is metallic. So I said, well, you guys go figure out the best way to do it out of the 3, and let me try to get my car painted that way. So I went to a lot of Bob Lutz, and I said, we have an engineering problem. And we don't know how to do I kind of exaggerated maybe a little bit. I said, we don't know exactly what we're going to do with the future stripes. And I said, but I will volunteer my car to be white with blue stripes. And is that okay? And he said, yeah, go ahead and do it, but make sure everybody else approves. So then I had to go to Francois Castaigne, I had to go to Tom Gale, and then marketing and PR, and I had to get the plant manager to agree to build the car that way. because plant managers don't want to get into anything like that. But the plant manager we got along really well. So everybody agreed to do it. So I asked the guys to create a set of white with blue stripe panels. Then all of a sudden, Tom Gale and Francois Castain called, and he said, well, we want our cars white with blue stripes as well. So I thought, okay, I can't say no, because if I said no, then they would say, well, Sandy, we think there's another way to do it besides doing your car. And of course there was. We could have done it, a lot of different ways. So I said, sure, we'll do that, but please don't say anything to anybody else, because there are other vice presidents and directors and so forth that have roadsters that are green and roadsters that are yellow, and they, paint my coupe yellow to match my roadster, or paint my coupe green. So that was probably the biggest secret that we had. And my boss, Roy Schober, he didn't even know about it. And so the paint guys had 4 sets of panels shipped into the plant, and we built the 3 cars. They were VIN 5, 6, and 13. It had to be done right at the beginning, because once you start building production, even though the production is low volume, you're not going to mess with the volume trying to plate, stuff like that. So we built the 3 cars, and the 4th set of panels were put on a surface plate, and they scribed it to do dimensional studies. So they basically destroyed the 4th set of panels, and so we got 3 cars.
One of the advantages to the Viper production process was we did not paint panels in the plant. There was no paint going on in the assembly area. Everything was done outside at outside suppliers. They would mold the panels, they would sand and prep the panels, paint the panels, and deliver them to the plant in sequence in color. So you were able to pull some tricks like this because you were working with spray guns, not production robot painting systems that they would use today. You'd have to flush 100 gallons of paint through a system to change colors in a plant today just to get the robots up and running. So luckily we had a guy with a gun that was able to pull some of these theatrics on the side.
My question is, who was credited with coming up with the original Sneaky Pete logo and where the name comes from?
I have no idea where the name came from. The Sneaky Pete.
Well, Pete Glass was one of our buddies from Team Shelby, and Pete was really the guy that got Team Shelby going, kept it going. And he was the guy that drafted me to go over there, because I did all the turbo engines for Team Shelby stuff too. And Pete was sneaky about stuff. He got stuff done, he just, whatever it took, he did it.
Well, he was really good at the reappropriation process. He reappropriated an entire facility for us. We literally acquisition computers and desks and put an entire operation in place in a section of the old Plymouth Road, Kelvinator plant that became our Jeep and truck facility. And their styling group moved out of I think it was the 2nd floor on a Friday. It was empty. By Monday, it was Team Viper. The desks were in place, there were computers plugged in, we had a shop set up in the back, and we were ready to rock and roll. And when facilities came in to find out what they were going to figure out what they're going to do with this empty space, they couldn't find it. It wasn't empty anymore.
Lori's got a question.
Oh, I just, for the white cars, there's an event next week in Michigan, and it will be the first time that the 3 white cars will be on display since they were born. It's gonna be like a little mini family reunion for the 3 white cars, they'll be on display. So that's kind of exciting, and I think there'll probably be some pictures, you'll probably see them maybe in quarterly or whatever like that, but that's gonna be kind of cool, is to have all 3 of them together.
That's great.
Yeah,
I didn't tell that secret.
I know, the secret got out, but that's,
Otherwise.
Yeah, that's the Team Becker 35th anniversary.
yes, yes.
Sandy, can you tell us how you got your red one? Because that's a big story too.
Well, that's a very exciting story, but 3 of us, besides the executives, they can get what they want. They want a Gen 1, Roadster, they're gonna have one. First year they were running at 200 cars. Second year, I think they were approximately 1,000 cars. And anyways, 3 of us that I consider the guys from Team White, part of the small group that Ken talked about. We had Roadsters ordered, and we didn't think we were going to get one. I think that ended up, like I said, about 1,000 cars. I think we had between 1,500 and 2,000 orders. Of course, a lot of customers were upset because they didn't get their car, and so I had one of the Chrysler people get a Viper. Some people didn't think that was such a good thing. We did not get a special price on the car. I just want everybody to know that. But anyways, I had one ordered, and it was getting down to the end of production. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get my car. And I'm not sure if it was maybe the last 10 or 20 cars or something like that. They basically didn't have any more red parts. And so Howard Lewis was the plant manager. And I mentioned earlier that Howard and I we're good friends. We even played golf together. And I spent a lot of time in the plant, so we just got to be good friends. But anyways, there was only black cars were going to be built. So he went out and said, that's it for red cars, we're not building anymore. Only black cars to the end of production, because Saudi Arabia has half a dozen black cars ordered. Well, I always wondered why would Saudi Arabia want black cars? It's kind of hot over there. But anyways, so I was all disappointed, and so I went out in the plant, and I went around the plant and I found enough red parts to build one car. So I didn't say anything to Howard Lewis, because I knew what the answer would be. So I was on the line a lot. I actually spent a lot of time on the line working with the guys, building the cars, making sure that things were done as well as possible and so forth. And so I talked him into building my car. And so, anyways, so here's the line with a bunch of black cars and one red car. So Howard Lewis's office is on the 2nd floor, but he had a nice big window that he could look out of his office and see the last third of the assembly line. And he looked out and he saw that red car. And he just went out and just started screaming at everybody. I told you guys no red cars. Who the hell decided that this was going to happen? And they said, well, it's Sandy's car. We didn't think that you would mind. I don't care who the hell's car it is. I told you no red car. So anyways, I stayed away from Howard for a while.
I know Mike had a question. Yeah, real quick. First of all, it's surreal for you guys to be here. Car came out in '92. Obviously, we all know about the auto show cars and all that. But just loving it since my early 20s and talking to these stories. It's like almost like unreal, to be honest with you. But I'm getting emotional. I'm talking about cars. It's crazy. But 285 cars in '92. How does that number become the number? Is it like pre-orders? I don't know how it was back then. Was it somebody said, we're going to build 300 and you fell short Does anybody know how that number ever came about?
We built as many as we could build for about the first 3 years. It was so hard to get panels that were up to spec, that would fit, that didn't have various assembly issues, fit, finish, outgassing. We're learning about RTM panels. RTM is a resin transfer method. You end up with a fiberglass reinforced part, but you start out by putting a fiberglass preformed mat in a mold, and then you close up the mold, clamp it tight, and you inject the resin into the mold. Well, if that fiberglass mat was shifted just a quarter of an inch, you're resin rich on the edge of the parts. You know, you can't put the muffin back in the cookie tray at that point. You got a junk part. But you don't know that necessarily until you start working with the part, because the resin has hidden the substrate, the fiberglass. So you don't know you got a resin-rich corner until it breaks off, and then that's out, next. So we built as many as we could build.
How cool is that? Okay, thank you.
One of the issues that Ken kind of touched on is if you didn't get the resin mixed properly with the mat, then that was what caused most of the issues on the surface, because the mat would kind of move up. I mean, it's only that, but the mat would kind of move up a little bit, so you didn't have as much material above it. And if that mat was on the top surface, then you could see it, or it was so thin, it created a problem. So that caused a lot of trouble, and it was basically because totally new process. And the fact that the hood was so freaking large that ran all the way around. I mean, if it would have been a hood that you say like the Gen 5s, I feel that you wouldn't have had any problems, because you could have controlled it way better than this huge thing to try to get the resin to flow all the way around, down, and everything. And that was a major task to try to get right.
Thank you, thank you.
The Gen 3, 4, and 5 are not RTM, you might notice. I mean, we had more shipping costs assigned to some of the clamshell hoods for the first 2 generations of cars, shipping them back to the supplier to be repainted and repaired, and shipping them than we had in the rest of the parts of the entire car. So, and I think the tooling for the Gen 5 would probably cost more than we paid to tool the entire first generation. So it's light years ahead, but we were building a Cobra for the 90s at the time, and it was like, here's the technology, here's the $49 million that you guys have to work with, which essentially in the corporate budget was zero. Literally was zero. We did the first, I don't know how many months of the program on that $49.9 million, because we didn't want the bean counters to see us. And if we'd have gone over 50 million by a dime, suddenly we're on the radar, we're on the spreadsheet, and they're knocking at our door. And wonder how many bands do you have with Penicillins on the glass.
And from the engine standpoint, we didn't get certification for the 92s until, I think it was February of 92. So we were kind of dragging our feet on building the cars because no certification. And we had a few issues, that CARB was really running the show at that point, and we had misfire requirements that were pretty loose at that time, but some of the other OBD monitors that had to be calibrated and certified, they just weren't there yet. So Francois would always say, oh, Dick will get it done, but I didn't have a lot of the resources I needed to get it done, so a lot of it was by guessing by golly.
Any other questions?
How much did Carroll Shelby contribute to the overall development of the car? Was it just his name, or did he actually get involved in the development? He was there.
But he was having heart surgery, heart transplant surgery. He was more of a, iconic figure that we looked up to, and he did show up at the executive meetings and such, and we'd shake his hand, and he'd tell you what he liked and what he didn't like.
We'd have an executive review every month where Carol would fly in and Lutz was there, the same deal and so on. But Carol, I found Carol to be a very interesting guy. I honestly, I didn't give him the respect that I probably should have, you know, that he was just one of the guys. And he and I would sit in the back of the room as they're going through, you know, all these items, and we just kind of crack jokes back and forth together about it. You know, so he honestly didn't contribute that much, but just having him there was worth something. Yeah.
I gotta do this, okay. During these monthly reviews, you know, I was one of the guys that had to go up and talk about the issues of what we were doing and things like that. And you know, for the body stuff, you know, for my responsibility. But after these reviews, Neil Hanneman, who was the hotshot driver for Viper, and he did all the driving, and he was just a fantastic driver. And after the reviews, I would ask Neil to go with me, let me drive a car around the road course, and give me some tips on how to drive and what I'm doing. Because what he used to do is he used to take guys on what I call scary rides. Okay? So if somebody, you know, was there and let's just say they didn't show up all the time, or, you know, whatever. Or maybe they were a guest, I don't know. Somebody would say, go for a scary ride with Neil Hanneman. And he'd put him in the car and he'd do a lap around the handling course and just scare the heck out of you. And he did with me. He'd go through corners and I swear there's no way you could go through that corner. And he'd come out and he was that far from the grass. And I'm holding on and I was like, oh my God. So anyways, I would ask him to take me for a lesson. And one day after one of the meetings, I went over and jumped in the car, you know. Neil said he'd give me another lesson. And it happened to be a car with a 5-point belt system. And, you know, I wasn't a race car guy and so forth. And so I looked down and it's like, there's this 5-point belt system. How do you connect this thing, right? Carroll Shelby is standing right there. And he walks over to the car and looks at me. He looks at me kind of, because I'm looking down. He says, you don't know how to connect that, do you, son? And I said, no, I actually don't. And he says, well, let me help you. So he reaches inside and he connects the belts and says, there you go, you're all set. And I said, thank you. So I gotta say that I'm the only person ever that had Carroll Shelby connect him to a 5-point belt system.
This is awesome, by the way. Learning all the stories and the anecdotes. You know, for all of us who have like Gen 1, Gen 2, part of their like aura is that, you know, they're renowned to be hard to handle. They don't have the ABS, they don't have traction control. At what point in the design process was that a conscious decision, or was it more of like we don't have the budget, we can't get the parts? At what point of like the development of the car did you decide not to put that technology in?
Well, the car was envisioned as a Cobra for the 90s. It did not have power seats. It did not have the mirrors on the outside of the car. I mean, the outside rear view mirrors are from a Dodge Stealth, and then the frame at the base rather was modified to fit the Viper. All of the Dodge Stealth mirrors had power motors in them. And I said to Bob Lutz, point blank, closer than you and I are. Can I leave the power motors and the electric in the mirrors? He said, no. So it was a conscious decision to build the car as a driver's sports car. Now when I built the GTSRs and we went to the Lons, I had guys the size of Olivia Beretta, who was about 5.5 feet, if that, and then we had some of the, Justin Bell's pretty tall, and we had Wendlinger's a taller guy. We're getting the drivers that were a foot different. So I put power mirrors on the GTSRs at Le Mans. And once that was the case, the lid was open, and I got to put it on the rest of the cars. I got to leave the power mirrors on, because now they were official race parts.
And that was, like Ken said, that right from the beginning. This is basically a race car main street, and it was a Cobra 90s, and it wasn't gonna have that, so, yeah. One example that I usually mention is the adjustable pedals. The adjustable pedals would have been cheaper and lighter if they would have been electric, but we made it mechanical because it fit the nature of the car. And there were a couple other little things, like even the button on the outside of the Gen 2. That button is electrical unless my memory is wrong, but we made it feel mechanical. And the same thing with the door handle. We made them feel mechanical, even in some cases where they were not, because that was the nature of the car.
And we just wanted to scare the hell out of you.
Did you ever consider putting a Hemi head on there?
Well, that's a whole story too, about as long as you're on. But the bottom line for that is that the Hemi was banished. The V10 is the personality of the Viper, and that's the way engineering determined the Viper's a V10.
I heard that the Gen 1, Gen 2 headlights were concept lights for
Well, the mechanicals, I believe, we didn't tool everything in the lamp, but that was we were put into a Viper wrapping and lens and so forth. But there was some sort of a program, I think, that Roy Schoberg got wind of. Was it a BMW lamp, I believe? The tooling was available. And the suppliers were kind of more than happy to put it to good use. So.
What about the bubble inside, laying bubbles? I heard that was made inside, was like $1 or $2 to remove it.
Well, it costs money to remove it, and it's an easy way to aim the lamps. I mean, it's great. The tool is right there.
Very popular.
Yes, yes.
Tooling for a lamp, for a taillight lens at the time, it would have been about $250,000 a corner. You know, so if you anything you could save money on, we were out trying to save money. The side marker lights in the front, that's a whole story also. The amber lamps in the Gen 1, Gen 2 cars, they actually came out of an AutoZone. And I'm not lying to you. They fit the pocket. Somebody, I think it might have been Mike Cipineri, one of our electrical guys, happened to see them, and they were close enough to what styling had established. Why don't you plug these into that opening? And styling goes, yeah, they don't look all that bad. So all we had to do was, the supplier had, I don't know, maybe a 4 or 5 cavity mold. We paid him to make some changes to one of the cavities to bring the lamp up to an SAE or a federally mandated standard. And we got our lamps out of that cavity, out of the same mold that he sold lights to AutoZone and everybody for their boat trailers. That's where your side marker light came from in the front of the car.
Quick question, I have to ask since I have one. The 96 RT10, which are kind of called like the Gen 1.5s, was it basically just leftover parts that you wanted to use up, or was there a reason for it? They're hard to find.
I don't know. I think the plant manager would have to come up with the answer for that one. That's the thing too, is that we were engineering. We made the stuff work. We didn't necessarily make all the combinations and determine what was going to be what kind of a package and what stripes got on what car and all of that. We just made sure all the pieces worked.
I'm talking about the 3 special.
What, no, I'm talking just the 96 RT10s, like they have the Gen 1 engine, Gen 2 suspension, their own computer, their micro, all this individual stuff. It just seemed like they were kind of their own little beast.
Yeah, they were so made like that.
not talking 95.5 special.
No, just the regular gen.
Well, it depends on probably who you're talking to. I mean, if you're talking about the management, then you say, well, we have all these parts, what do you want to do? I mean, realistically, if they fit and they work and it didn't create any kind of a problem, why not use it? Because you're going to learn something, you know, to use these parts, to say, on the architect instead of just on the group.
If we're going specific one generation or anything. Yeah, there's like the Gen 1 engine, the Gen 2 suspension, and exhaust out the back was Gen 2 to me. I don't know.
Well, it was, it had to be compliant. The thing was, it still made a hack, but it had to be compliant for OBD 96. So it had ended up with a bunch of specific parts that are 96. And so the RT10 was different, and that's where you get the O2 sensor pins are switched, and some other stuff that happened was then a bunch of the hoops were made with harnesses from Mac, because you guys ran out of harnesses at Connor, and they went over and stole harnesses.
Well, it's just like working on Bob Lutz's car right now, Ken and I've been fixing that thing up. You go in there and you find, what part was that, you know? But the cylinder heads were leaking on his car, and they were prototype heads, because the production tooling wasn't ready yet, so we had to figure out what to use to build cars. And the race engines were using these production prototype tools, and we used those on production engines. You know, they were basically the same, but they didn't have that mold figured out yet, so it didn't really fill as well as it should have. And you ended up with a bunch of porosity that you couldn't seal. So I was driving Lutz's car last week, and all of a sudden it started smoking.
It disappeared out of it.
Yeah, it was in a big white cloud, and I didn't hear anything, I didn't sense anything, but I shut it off quickly and started it back up, and everything seemed fine.
Except for the cloud.
Except for the cloud. So we took those heads off, and there was a pretty significant amount of porosity around the number 10 spark plug.
Now, just imagine if you tell Bob Lutz that you're gonna fix up his car and make sure he's safe for the drive up to Bay Harbor. And yeah, we'll put a clutch in it and we'll make sure the tires are good and we'll shine it up for you. Hey Bob, you know that car you gave me?
So a 93-year-old man is going to drive this car up to Bay Harbor next weekend for the show. Assuming we get it over to his house by Tuesday or something.
Go ahead.
Remember those nice heads you gave?
So in Gen 3, you're 0 to 60 in first gear, practically 59 miles an hour, whatever it says on the transmission spec. Runs at idle unless if you're doing under 90 on the highway in overdrive in 6th gear. Was that all just emissions, or was there like a design thought around why you picked the rear end for that?
Yeah, it was partly the 0 to 60 time. You didn't want to have to do a shift, so you bring it right out to red line and you're 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it was fun to drive stuff, you know. That overdrive was way too deep, as you probably know. I hated it. The skip shift was another thing that I hated, but it got a few tenths of a mile per gallon on the city cycle, so Jim Royer, who was the engine lead on the design team, he fought for that and I lost. But it's the first thing everybody gets rid of.
So I'll take when you're done. No, I didn't mean to.
Oh, and one other thing about Shelby I'd like to throw out there was when we were in Indy in 1991 as a pace car, Carroll was there every day because he was the driver. But he was famous for his chili, right? So he would make us chili every day for lunch. You know, and it was a different chili, and they put up the octane ratings on it and stuff. But he was a great guy just to be around. At least in Indy, I have a great opinion.
unpretentious, just one of the guys.
Yeah.
That's the way we all work together.
I thought I would hate Matt Damon as Carol Shelby, but I thought he actually did a pretty good job.
Well done.
Any chance for a Gen 6?
Well, Ralph and I go around about that. And my position and Herb Albig's position is that unless it's got a V10 in it, it ain't a Viper.
Hell yeah.
And we'll wrap it up with you.
What do you feel is a true reason why the Viper stopped production? I heard it was because it didn't pass federal federal crash test.
There was a couple of regulations that the car didn't meet. One of them was side impact. And that's a whole can of worms, getting the airbags in there and working it properly and stuff. And the other was, there was just continuing more stringent requirements for OBD and emissions. The engine was really good as far as emissions goes, but it wasn't that good. And also the OBD requirement for misfire, in my opinion, killed the car as well. Because that was just something we spent millions and millions of dollars trying to do misfire detection, and it was marginal at best, but you couldn't spend any more money on it, and there weren't really any reliable systems out there for a large engine like that. Frankly, I don't know how the other leagues, running V12s and V10s get it. It's really tough to do.
There's also a running battle of the corporate commitment to how much money are you going to spend on a car that doesn't bring in cash. There's a contingent over here that argues that you've got a Halo car, and I understand the Corvette doesn't make GM any money, but it's a hell of a Halo car and they build it every day and they won that battle. And Chrysler never really won that battle, with the Viper, because it never really generated a lot of cash. You can tell that. I mean, obviously, what we put into it versus what we get out of it. But we would build a Viper, and then a fleet buyer would come in and go, any company that's nuts enough to build that car, I want my fleet of Dodges, and they'll buy 27 pickups for their landscaping company and that sort of thing. So as a halo, it's dramatic for the corporation, and it's a great place to exercise the engineers and develop new technologies. But we pretty much lost that battle now because of everything that's just happening out there with the electric cars, and we may have steam engines tomorrow, who knows. But there's just not really a whole lot of market taste in the company, I guess, for another V10.
We're gonna wrap this up for now so everyone gets some lunch. We've been at this for a little while now, but I want to personally thank you guys all for coming. This has been a great experience. They are walking around, say hi. It's kind of a once in a lifetime kind of chance to meet these guys. And I really want to personally thank Mike Sutton. He was one of the guys that made sure that we got all of them here. There's a lot of people involved, but he kind of like he headed that way, yeah. So with that being said, you want to stand up for a second? The Viper guys have always done Gentleman's Jack, and have always engraved the bottles and all those other things. So for Snakes on the Mountain, I've been trying to keep up that tradition. So this year's Gentleman's Jack bottle is going to go to Mike, because without Mike, he wouldn't have made it happen. Nice.
And I don't drink.
Yeah, well, there's one for now.
Well,
There's a Viper on the back, so it's fine.
I know some Team Viper guys that'll help with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, next weekend maybe. Thank you.
But seriously, you guys, thank you for coming. Thank you for talking about all this stuff. It's been a great experience, and it's great to have everyone come and see this too, because without you guys, this stuff isn't possible. So thank you. one of the other cool things, and personally thank, but Mike Moyer has a Viper collection. He lends cars to the Viper team and a couple of the presidents that came out, so they could actually participate in the event. So it was cool, instead of rental cars, they got to drive Vipers.